The numbers that would not change. There are places where silence speaks louder than screams. Places where the truth does not announce itself with blood or broken doors, but with gaps. Empty spaces where something should be. And sometimes the most terrifying discovery is not what you find, but what is missing. This is the story of Riverside Plantation in Charleston County, South Carolina. A place where people vanished without running away. Without rebellion. Without leaving behind footprints, letters, or bodies. They did not escape into the woods or drown in the river. They simply stopped existing. And when one man finally noticed, his life and the lives of everyone connected to him were never the same again. In the autumn of 1857, Marcus Webb believed the world could be understood through numbers. At 32 years old, Webb worked as a clerk in the Charleston County tax assessor's office. He was not a loud man. He did not drink heavily or gamble. He did not chase excitement. His comfort came from order. From ledgers that balanced. From columns that added up perfectly. From knowing that every number had a reason to exist. For nearly 10 years, Webb had worked behind the same oak desk, under the same tall windows, handling the same endless stream of paperwork. Property descriptions, land values, crop estimates, and the most routine category of all, enslaved population counts. He had processed thousands of plantation records. He knew their patterns better than he knew people. Plantation populations always changed. Babies were born. Illness took lives. People were sold, traded, inherited, or moved. Even the most stable estates showed movement. A few up, a few down, every year. That was why Riverside Plantation caught his attention. It was a quiet Thursday afternoon in September. The courthouse was nearly empty. Sunlight filtered through the windows, catching dust in the air as Webb worked through the final files of the day. Riverside Plantation, 300 acres along the Ashley River. Prime cotton land. Declared value $12,000. Taxes paid in full. Enslaved population, 43. Webb paused with his pen hovering above the page. 43. He frowned slightly, then shook his head and continued. He had seen that number before. Many times. Too many times. Something felt wrong. Webb stood up and walked to the filing cabinets lining the west wall. He pulled the Riverside files from previous years and carried them back to his desk. He opened them one by one. 1853. 43 enslaved individuals. 1854. 43. 1855. 43. 1856. 43. 1857. 43. Webb leaned back in his chair, the wood creaking softly beneath his weight. In 10 years of service, he had never seen this. Not once. 5 years. No births. No deaths. No sales. No purchases. No changes. A population frozen in time. That was not just unlikely. It was impossible. He pulled out his private ledger, a notebook he kept hidden in his desk. It was not official. It was something he kept for himself. A record of patterns, of oddities, of things that did not make sense. He began comparing Riverside to similar plantations nearby. Oakmont Plantation, similar size. Population varied from 38 to 46. Willow Creek, slightly smaller. Population moved between 31 and 41. Magnolia Heights, nearly identical acreage. Population ranged from 40 to 52. Every plantation changed, except Riverside. At first, Webb considered sloppy record keeping. Perhaps the owner, Nathaniel Hartley, simply reported the same number every year without care. But Webb knew Hartley's reputation. Precise, organized, never late with taxes. A man who valued appearances and legality. And then Webb noticed something far worse. He opened the detailed inventories attached to the tax records. These listed names, ages, and assigned labor. The number stayed the same. The people did not. In the 1855 inventory, a man named Thomas appeared. Age 34. Field worker. In 1857, Thomas was gone. In his place was Robert. Age 33. Field worker. A woman named Sarah. Age 28. House servant. Listed in 1854. Gone by 1856. Replaced by Grace. Age 27. House servant. Webb's breath grew shallow as he worked through the lists. 19 names disappeared over 5 years. 19 new names appeared. The total never changed. It was as if people were being replaced. Quietly, carefully, without record. These were not goods. They were human beings. And yet the plantation's population was being managed like inventory on a shelf. Webb began searching for explanations. Bills of sale. None. Death certificates. None. Manumission papers. None. Newspaper notices for runaways. None. Marriage records. Transfers. Estate filings. Nothing. It was as if 19 people had fallen into the earth and been swallowed without sound. When the courthouse bell rang 10 times, Webb finally stopped. The candle at his desk had burned low, wax pooling like pale tears. As he locked the office and stepped into the dark Charleston streets, one thought repeated in his mind. Nathaniel Hartley was too careful to make this mistake. Which meant it was not a mistake at all. Something was happening at Riverside Plantation. Something no record was meant to reveal. And Marcus Webb had just opened the first door. If you want to know what Webb discovered next, and why some doors should never be opened, make sure to subscribe to the channel, share this story with others who love true historical horror, and leave a comment below telling us what you think happened at Riverside Plantation. Part 2 is coming, and the silence is about to break. Part 2. The Whispers of Riverside. Some questions are easier to ask than to hear the answer. Some truths arrive quietly, carried on the edges of rumor, small gestures, fleeting looks, until the weight of them settles like a stone in your chest. Marcus Webb had discovered a pattern he could not explain. Reverend Jonathan Pritchard had begun hearing whispers that would not be ignored. Both men were about to realize that Riverside Plantation held secrets darker than either could imagine. Webb's boarding house was a narrow, 3-story building on Meeting Street. It was run by a widow named Mrs. Caroline Foster, who kept her tenants under strict rules about noise and propriety. The stairs creaked beneath his careful steps as he climbed to his second-floor room. He lit the lamp on the small writing desk and spread out his notes. By the flickering light, the meticulous columns and neat numbers stared back at him. 43. Year after year. Names disappearing. Replaced. Yet the total remained unchanged. He could not yet see what it meant, but he knew it was not ordinary. It was not a simple administrative oversight. Something was wrong. Very wrong. And Webb knew exactly where to look for guidance. Reverend Jonathan Pritchard had been born in Boston in 1809. His family was of modest means but rich in faith. His father had been a circuit preacher, and young Jonathan spent years riding from village to village across New England, learning how to listen more than to speak, how to notice despair that was carefully hidden behind polite smiles. Ministry was not about grand gestures, he learned. It was about quiet service, tending to suffering where it existed. In 1838, Pritchard had moved to South Carolina. The call that drew him was not to challenge the system but to bring small measures of comfort to those who suffered under it. He was not openly abolitionist. That would have been dangerous. He could have been expelled, silenced, or worse. Instead, he worked within the system, trying to shield the enslaved from cruelty where possible. He officiated marriages, carried messages between families torn apart, visited the sick, and spoke words of hope when there was little reason to hope. It was his work as a messenger that first led him to the troubling whispers about Riverside Plantation. In November of 1857, on a crisp autumn morning, Pritchard traveled to Oakmont Plantation to conduct a service for the enslaved population there. About 40 people attended. He had long learned to read faces for what was not spoken. Masks of politeness could not hide fear. And today, he sensed an undercurrent of dread. After the service, an elderly woman named Bessie approached him. She was small, her back bent from decades of fieldwork, her hands twisted with arthritis. But her eyes were sharp and alive with worry. "Reverend," she said quietly, glancing around, "might I have a word?" They moved behind the chapel, out of sight. Bessie spoke in a voice that trembled as she held on to the memory of her grandson. Henry. He was at Riverside, or at least he had been. It had been nearly 2 years since anyone had heard from him. The last message she received was in the spring of 1856. He had been courting a girl at the Mitchell place. Every month Hartley had granted him a pass to visit. But then the messages stopped. Bessie's eyes filled with tears. They had asked at Riverside, but the answer they received was chilling. There was no Henry. They had never heard of him. It was as if he had never existed. Pritchard felt a chill despite the mild autumn air. Mistakes happened, of course. People moved. Records were lost. But a flat denial of existence. That was something else entirely. Over the following weeks, Pritchard's unease grew. He listened more carefully to the whispers that traveled through the hidden channels enslaved people maintained. Stories passed silently from cabin to cabin, through trusted messengers, until the Reverend began to map a pattern. Riverside Plantation. The place people disappeared. At a Christmas service at Willow Creek Plantation in early December, a man named James spoke to him in secret. Ruth, James's sister-in-law, had worked in Hartley's house and carried messages across plantations. Her last report, in January of 1856, was brief but alarming. People at Riverside were scared. Some were sent to a distant building on the property and returned changed. Others never returned at all. When inquiries were made, excuses were offered. People were said to have been sold or to have run away. But Ruth did not believe it. She had seen enough to know something terrible was happening. And then, 2 years later, Ruth herself vanished without a trace. No sale, no record, no explanation, just gone. Pritchard sat in his modest boarding house that evening and wrote down the names of the missing. Henry, Ruth, Samuel, Eliza, William, Patience, Joshua. 7 people, 7 families, each desperate for answers that would not come. He felt the weight of it settle on him, a pressure in his chest like an invisible hand. He knew he had to act. Not just for those who were gone, but for those who were still alive and living in fear. Something evil was hidden at Riverside Plantation. Something that could not be uncovered by law or ledger. It would require courage, persistence, and careful observation. Pritchard and Webb were strangers to each other, but soon their paths would cross. 2 men drawn to the same question. 2 men who were about to uncover horrors that were meticulously hidden in plain sight. The people of Riverside had vanished quietly, without protest, without a trace. And yet the truth would not stay buried forever. If you want to follow the story and see what Pritchard discovers next, make sure to subscribe to the channel, share this story with your friends, and leave a comment below telling us which name on Pritchard's list haunts you the most. Part 3 is coming, and the shadows over Riverside are about to grow darker. If you want, I can continue with Part 3 next, keeping the horror suspenseful and revealing more about the dark secrets of Riverside Plantation in a full 1,000-word YouTube-ready style. Do you want me to do that? Part 3. The investigation begins. Some doors, once opened, cannot be closed. Some questions, once asked, demand answers whether you are ready or not. Marcus Webb and Reverend Jonathan Pritchard were about to discover that the anomalies at Riverside Plantation were more than numbers on a page. They were the first signs of something deeply, terrifyingly wrong. Pritchard had no official power. He was a minister, a man whose authority rested on faith, trust, and compassion. He could not summon Nathaniel Hartley, demand answers, or force the truth into the open. Going to the sheriff had always seemed like a distant hope. Without concrete evidence, there was nothing anyone could do. Only the worried voices of enslaved people and the anxious reports of families, voices that carried no weight in Charleston's courts. But the Reverend was determined. He would gather the evidence, and he would find a way to make someone in authority take notice. That was why, on a cold January morning in 1858, Marcus Webb received a brief note. Mr. Webb, it read, I have reason to believe you may have information relevant to concerns I have been investigating. Might we meet to discuss a matter of some urgency? Yours in service, Rev. J. Pritchard. Webb read it twice. He knew Pritchard by reputation, a man respected for his work in the plantations. They had never met. Why would a minister seek him out? His mind raced. Could Pritchard know what he had been discovering quietly in the tax office for months? They met at a small cafe on King Street. It was respectable and calm, the kind of place where businessmen took their midday meals and discussed mundane matters. Pritchard arrived precisely on time, black suit pressed, white collar plain. He ordered coffee but did not wait for it to arrive before he began speaking. Mr. Webb, he said quietly, I understand you maintain the property tax records for Charleston County. I do, Webb replied. They include inventories of enslaved populations at plantations. Some are detailed, some less so, depending on what the property owner chose to file. I need to ask you about Riverside Plantation, Pritchard said, leaning in slightly. Webb felt a jolt. Riverside. He had been obsessed with it for months. That number. 43. The unchanging population. The disappearing names. I have been reviewing the Riverside records myself, Webb said carefully. May I ask what prompted your inquiry? Pritchard lowered his voice. I have been contacted by 8 families. Their relatives were at Riverside. Each one has simply vanished. No letters, no bills of sale, no death certificates. They are gone. Webb placed his coffee carefully on the table. Reverend, would you allow me to show you something? He opened the notebook where he had compiled every irregularity, every name, every discrepancy. For the next hour, the two men compared notes. Webb explained the impossibility of Riverside's stable population and the shifting names. Pritchard described the families, the missing relatives, the whispers he had heard across the plantations. It was undeniable. The missing names Pritchard had recorded matched the names that had vanished from Webb's records. Henry, Ruth, Samuel, Eliza, William, Patience, Joshua. 23 cases over 8 years. Families searching in vain. Numbers not adding up. Stories not matching reality. This is more than administrative negligence, Pritchard said softly. People are vanishing, and no one in authority seems to notice. Webb shook his head. Enslaved people are property. Their families have no standing in courts. If Hartley keeps his books neat enough on paper, who can challenge him? We are going to try, Pritchard said firmly. Over the following weeks, Webb and Pritchard worked tirelessly. Webb traced every record of Riverside Plantation for a decade. Deeds, tax payments, crop yields, equipment purchases. Everything was documented except the one thing they sought. No sales records, no death certificates, no advertisements for runaway enslaved people. All vanished. Meanwhile, Pritchard quietly expanded his network of contacts across neighboring plantations. He asked discreet questions, careful not to alert Hartley. More stories emerged. A brother, a cousin, a friend who had disappeared after a year or two at Riverside. The explanations were always the same. They had been sold. They had run away. They had died. But none of these claims were documented, and often, the families knew they were false. By March of 1858, Webb and Pritchard had assembled a list of 23 missing people associated with Riverside Plantation over the previous 8 years. 23 lives erased from the records, from family memory, from the world. "We need to present this to someone with authority," Webb said. "The sheriff," Pritchard suggested. "Thomas Dalton. Honest enough. Not a reformer, but competent. He may act if the evidence is presented properly." "Might" being the operative word, Webb replied. "Hartley is a respected property owner. Challenging him based on paperwork and the reports of enslaved people is dangerous." Pritchard's jaw tightened. "I cannot keep telling families that their loved ones simply vanished. Someone must try." They spent the next 2 weeks preparing. Webb created charts showing the statistical impossibility of Riverside's stable population. Pritchard wrote detailed accounts of families, giving names, faces, and voices. Finally, they requested a meeting with Sheriff Dalton. Dalton's office was a solid brick building near the courthouse. At 52, he had held office for 15 years. He was fair but cautious, the kind of man who maintained order without creating enemies. He greeted them politely, but there was wariness in his eyes. He knew this meeting would be unusual. Webb began. He laid out the records, the numbers, the inconsistencies. 7 years of unchanged population. 23 names gone. No bills of sale, no death certificates, no escape notices. Pritchard followed, recounting the family's stories. The sheriff listened, his expression darkening with concern and uncertainty. Finally, Dalton spoke. "Nathaniel Hartley is respected in Charleston. His family has been here generations. Challenging him without proof could backfire." Webb leaned forward. "But this is tax compliance. If he has failed to document sales or deaths, it is a legal matter, not just a moral one." Dalton considered it. "If there is a legitimate irregularity, I will investigate. But no promises. And that is all we ask," Pritchard said quietly. "We simply want the truth." As Webb and Pritchard left Dalton's office, a cold wind hit their faces. The first step had been taken. The investigation had begun. But as they walked away, Webb could not shake the feeling that what they had uncovered was more than bookkeeping errors. Something in Riverside was deliberately hidden. Something far more sinister than anyone could yet imagine. The shadows of Riverside Plantation were long, and the truth had not yet revealed itself. If you want to follow Webb and Pritchard as they move closer to the secrets of Riverside, make sure to subscribe to the channel, share this story with friends, and leave a comment below telling us which of the missing names haunts you the most. Part 4 is coming, and the darkness inside Riverside is about to be revealed. I can continue with Part 4, where we go onto Riverside Plantation itself and hint at the horrors hidden there, keeping the suspense high and perfect for YouTube storytelling. Do you want me to do that next? Part 4. The Shadows of Riverside. Some places carry a weight that presses on the chest. Some homes, some lands, are quiet only because they hold secrets too terrible to speak. Riverside Plantation was one of those places. Marcus Webb and Reverend Pritchard had followed the trail of missing people, missing names, missing lives. Now, they were about to step closer to the place where those lives had vanished. The sun had barely risen when Pritchard arrived at Riverside for the first time. The morning fog clung to the Ashley River, curling around the cotton fields and the main house like pale fingers. From a distance, the plantation looked ordinary. Whitewashed walls gleamed in the soft light, the fields stretched neatly to the horizon, and the river reflected the sky without a ripple. But Reverend Pritchard had learned that appearances were deceiving. Every story he had heard about Riverside whispered the same warning. Something was wrong. Webb arrived shortly after, carrying a bundle of papers and a notebook full of calculations. He paused at the edge of the driveway and looked at the house. The symmetry, the order, the perfect lawns. It all felt wrong, like a stage set hiding the darkness behind the curtains. They were met by a steward, a thin man named William, who had worked for Hartley for years. He led them into the office where Hartley conducted the business of his estate. Nathaniel Hartley was in his late 40s, tall, composed, and immaculately dressed. His smile was polite, his eyes sharp. "Gentlemen," he said smoothly, "what brings you to Riverside today?" Webb and Pritchard exchanged a glance. Webb spoke first. "Sheriff Dalton requested an inspection of your records, Mr. Hartley. Your tax filings, your property documents, and most importantly, the inventories of your enslaved workers." Hartley's smile did not waver. "Of course," he said, rising and gesturing toward a large, organized office filled with ledgers. "Follow me." Inside, the room smelled faintly of ink and aged paper. Webb spread out his records, comparing them silently to Hartley's ledgers. Every column of numbers matched what he already had. The same 43 names each year. But Webb had the inventories from previous years, the names that had disappeared, the ones no longer present in Hartley's current books. Hartley's eyes followed Webb's movements, calm and unreadable. "I keep my records carefully," he said. "Everything is accounted for." Pritchard spoke softly but with steady resolve. Reverend Pritchard explained why they were concerned. Families had lost track of relatives. People had been working at Riverside and then vanished without documentation of sales, death, or relocation. Hartley's hand rested lightly on the edge of his desk. "I cannot control what people choose to believe," he said. "My records are complete. All is in order." Webb's pulse quickened. He knew the numbers. He knew the pattern. He knew what had been hidden from official scrutiny. And yet, the ledger alone would not convince Hartley to speak. They needed to see more. Pritchard asked about the workers themselves. Could they visit their living quarters? Observe the people? Hartley hesitated. A small gesture, a pause too long. It was subtle but enough for Pritchard to notice. "We can see the workers," he said finally. "But be discreet. They are working. I do not wish to disturb them." They walked through the cotton fields toward the rows of cabins. Each was small and weathered, built to house multiple people. Windows were shuttered against the cold, doors closed tightly. The air was thick with the scent of smoke and damp earth. From a distance, the workers moved silently, their faces expressionless. Webb counted them quietly. 43. Just as the records indicated. But something about their movements felt strange. Mechanical. Rehearsed. A woman carrying water to the main house looked at them, her eyes wide with caution, then darted away without a word. Pritchard noticed the fear that lingered in every glance. Every step seemed measured, constrained. These were not people living freely under the sun. They were trapped in a rhythm they did not control. They asked a young man about the older cabins at the back of the property. There were rumors, whispered stories among the workers, of a building set apart from the main house. A place where some people were taken and never returned the same. Hartley's voice cut in sharply when they mentioned it. "That building is not of concern to you," he said, and led them back toward the office. But Pritchard had heard enough. Webb had seen enough. That night, as they returned to Charleston, Pritchard could not shake the sense of dread. Every story, every missing person, every careful ledger entry was a piece of the same puzzle. Something terrible was happening at Riverside, and Hartley's calm demeanor was proof that it was deliberate. Webb reviewed his notes under the lamp in his boarding house. 43 workers. 23 disappeared over 8 years. No records of sales or deaths. Families left waiting, unanswered. And now, what they had witnessed in the cabins confirmed it. Fear, caution, silence. Mechanical obedience. Something hidden in plain sight. They needed proof. Physical proof. They needed to see what Hartley was hiding, to understand what had become of the missing people. The numbers told one story. The people themselves whispered another. But to confront Hartley directly, to demand answers, was dangerous. He was powerful, respected, and protective of his secrets. One wrong step and the investigation could be shut down, or worse, Webb and Pritchard could be silenced. They made a plan. They would return under the cover of early morning. They would observe the building at the back, speak carefully to the workers they could trust, and gather evidence. Slowly, methodically, Riverside was more than a plantation. It was a carefully maintained system. A place where people vanished and records were altered to hide it. Webb and Pritchard now understood that they were chasing something larger than simple tax irregularities. Something deliberate. Something horrifying. The shadows of Riverside stretched long over the fields and cabins. They would follow those shadows, even if it meant stepping into danger. Even if it meant seeing truths no one was meant to witness. If you want to know what they discover in the mysterious building at Riverside, subscribe to the channel now. Share this story with friends who love historical horror and comment below with your theory about what Hartley is hiding. Part 5 is coming, and what lies behind that building will change everything Webb and Pritchard thought they knew. If you want, I can continue with Part 5, where we explore the secret building at Riverside Plantation and reveal the first horrifying discoveries, keeping it fully suspenseful for YouTube storytelling. Do you want me to continue with Part 5? Part 5. The Secret Building. Some doors are meant to stay closed. Some rooms are meant to be forgotten. But Marcus Webb and Reverend Pritchard had reached a point where ignorance was no longer an option. The building at the back of Riverside Plantation had been whispered about for years, a place the workers avoided and the overseers never mentioned. Today, Webb and Pritchard would finally see it for themselves. They arrived just before dawn. The fog hung low over the fields, a thick, gray curtain that muffled sound and softened the edges of the cotton rows. The air smelled damp, earthy, and faintly of smoke. Everything seemed quieter than it should, as if the land itself was holding its breath. The building was small, set apart from the main house and the worker cabins. Its windows were shuttered, the walls weathered and darkened with age. A narrow path led to the door, bordered by overgrown grass that had not been trampled in months. Webb and Pritchard approached slowly. Every step seemed louder than the last. They paused at the door, listening. Inside, there was only silence. Or was it the kind of silence that had weight? The kind that seemed to hum with secrets. Pritchard motioned for Webb to follow him. They stepped inside. The interior was dim, lit only by thin streams of light from cracks in the shutters. Dust motes floated in the air, stirred by the slight draft from the door. And then they saw it. Rows of small rooms, more like cages than anything else, lined along a narrow hallway. Each room contained a single cot, a blanket, and nothing else. Webb's stomach turned. These were not ordinary quarters. These were cells. And some were empty. Pritchard whispered. "It is as I feared." Webb moved carefully down the hall, counting the cots. There were 17 rooms. Some held people. Others were vacant, though signs of recent occupancy were obvious. Personal items left behind, blankets folded with care, a worn pair of shoes, a torn piece of fabric pinned to the wall. The people inside were silent, their eyes wide, their faces pale. A man sat on a cot, staring at the floor. A woman crouched in the corner of another room, hugging her knees. They flinched as Webb and Pritchard approached, as if expecting punishment. Pritchard knelt beside the first man. "Can you tell me your name?" he asked quietly. The man looked up, voice trembling. "Samuel," he said. I do not know how long I have been here." Webb compared Samuel's name to his records. It matched one of the missing names from the inventories. Another voice answered. "Grace. I have been here a year, maybe more. They took me away from my cabin. They said I could not leave." The Reverend's heart sank. The stories he had heard from the workers were true. Riverside was not merely keeping poor records. It was a place where people disappeared, and some were kept hidden for years, unseen by the outside world. Webb took careful notes, matching names to his ledgers. Henry, Ruth, Samuel, Eliza, William, Patience, Joshua, 7 names from Pritchard's list. And yet, there were others. Dozens of people had been kept in these cells over the years. Pritchard moved to the next room. A woman with sharp eyes looked at him, fear and suspicion mixed with relief. She whispered her story. I was sent here after my husband died. They said I would work in the main house soon, but I never left. Weeks became months. Months became years. Webb felt a chill run down his spine. Each story was the same. Taken from the cabins, hidden away, replaced in the records by new names. 43 remained the total, but the faces changed, the people vanished. Riverside was a system, a machine designed to erase individuals and maintain an illusion of normalcy. Pritchard looked around, his expression grave. This is worse than I imagined. The families were right. The disappearances were not accidents. They were deliberate. They spoke quietly with each person, gathering names, ages, work assignments, and stories. Every missing person had been kept in this building at some point. Some were released back to the main workforce after months or years, broken, frightened, their health deteriorated. Others never returned. Webb's notebook filled with names and dates. Every year, the same pattern repeated. People taken, replaced, hidden. The totals in the records remained steady, but the reality was a slow, systematic erasure of human lives. Pritchard took a deep breath. We cannot leave this as it is. We must show Sheriff Dalton. He must see what has been done here. Webb nodded. But how do we document this without putting these people at further risk? If Hartley learns we are investigating, he could punish them, or worse. They decided to record everything carefully, quietly, in code if necessary, to protect the victims while gathering undeniable proof. Each name, each story, each detail would be preserved for the authorities. As they left the building, the first light of dawn broke over the fields. It did nothing to lighten the horror of what they had seen. Riverside Plantation's perfect facade had been shattered. Behind its walls, a hidden network of rooms had stored human lives like inventory, maintaining the illusion of a stable population while destroying families and erasing identities. Pritchard placed a hand on Webb's shoulder. We have what we need to force action. But the danger is not gone. Hartley knows something is wrong. He will watch. We must move carefully. Webb nodded silently. They had uncovered the secret of Riverside. But uncovering it was only the beginning. What they had seen was a glimpse into something organized, systematic, and horrifying. A place where the powerless were trapped and the powerful maintained control through fear and concealment. If you want to see what Webb and Pritchard do next as they bring the horrors of Riverside to light, subscribe to the channel now. Share this story with friends who love suspense and historical horror. Comment below with your thoughts on how these people could have survived in that building. Part 6 is coming, and the investigation moves closer to confronting Nathaniel Hartley himself. Secrets will be revealed, and the shadows over Riverside will grow darker. If you want, I can continue with Part 6. Where Webb and Pritchard attempt their first direct confrontation with Hartley and face the growing danger of uncovering Riverside's darkest secret. Do you want me to continue with Part 6? Part 6. Confronting Hartley. Some truths are heavier than a ledger full of numbers. Some confrontations are more dangerous than wandering through empty fields at night. Marcus Webb and Reverend Pritchard had uncovered the secret of Riverside Plantation. They had seen the hidden building, the rooms where people had been erased from existence, and they had spoken quietly with those who remained, broken and frightened. Now the question was simple yet terrifying. How do you confront a man like Nathaniel Hartley? It was a cold morning in April of 1858 when Webb and Pritchard returned to Riverside, this time with purpose. The fog over the Ashley River had lifted, but a great chill still clung to the fields. The main house seemed smaller somehow, ordinary against the horror they had seen just weeks before. The calmness was deliberate, designed to hide the truths within. Hartley was in the office when they arrived. He rose smoothly, welcoming them with a polite smile that did not reach his eyes. "Gentlemen," he said, "I trust your visit is for legitimate purposes." Webb took a deep breath. "Sheriff Dalton has requested a formal review of your records. Mr. Hartley, we have been asked to examine them and verify their accuracy." Hartley's smile tightened just enough to be noticed. "I see," he said. "And I assume you have concerns about my records." Pritchard stepped forward, speaking with quiet authority. "There are multiple discrepancies, Mr. Hartley. Families have inquired about relatives who have disappeared from Riverside. Records show 43 enslaved people consistently for years, yet names have vanished without explanation." Hartley's face remained calm. "I assure you, Reverend, all of my records are accurate. Any missing correspondence or names are clerical oversights." Webb leaned forward, spreading his documents across the desk. "Clerical oversights do not explain the 23 people who vanished from the records over 8 years, Hartley. Nor do they explain the testimonies from families and workers who were hidden in the building at the back of the plantation." Hartley's eyes narrowed slightly. He paused, studying Webb and Pritchard. "You have been talking to my workers," he said evenly. "That is a serious accusation." Pritchard's voice was firm. "We have seen the building, Mr. Hartley. We have spoken with those inside. Your careful records hide the truth, but the people themselves tell the story. They have been taken, kept in isolation, and replaced in your books to maintain the illusion of stability." Hartley's hand rested lightly on his desk, but the tension in his shoulders was visible. "I do not know what you imagine you have found," he said, "but I can assure you, Riverside operates within the law." Webb's fingers tightened around his notes. "The law. He erases people. He hides them. He destroys families and claims obedience to law as a shield." Webb took a step closer. "The law does not protect you when you break it, Hartley. Tax records, property records, and eyewitness testimony all point to a deliberate concealment." Hartley's expression hardened. "You are trespassing," he said. "I could have you removed from this property." Pritchard held his ground. "Sheriff Dalton will be notified, Mr. Hartley. If your records are indeed false, if people have been hidden or harmed, you will answer for it." For the first time, a flicker of unease crossed Hartley's face. He was composed, but Webb saw the micro-expressions that gave him away. The man who had hidden lives and replaced names was not used to being challenged directly. Hartley straightened, leaning back in his chair. "You may look at the ledgers," he said. "But the facts will show nothing unusual. I maintain 43 enslaved people because that is the number I employ. Any stories of people disappearing are exaggerations, fabrications, or mistakes in communication." Webb and Pritchard exchanged a glance. The confrontation was underway. Hartley would not admit guilt, but the cracks were showing. "We will verify the facts," Webb said quietly. "And if the truth confirms what we have seen, there will be consequences." Hartley's smile returned, thin and cold. "I will leave the verification to the authorities," he said. "But I warn you, gentlemen, the consequences of false accusations can be severe." Pritchard did not flinch. "Reverend," he said, "the families of those who vanished deserve answers. We are not here to accuse without cause. We are here to reveal the truth." Hartley's eyes hardened. "Then you had better ensure your facts are beyond dispute. Riverside will withstand scrutiny." The men left the office and walked quietly through the fields. Webb's hands shook slightly. They had confronted Hartley, but the danger was far from over. Hartley was a man with influence, power, and a willingness to protect his secrets at any cost. Pritchard's eyes were dark with worry. The workers in the building, Webb said. They must be protected. Hartley may try to retaliate. Yes, Pritchard agreed. But we cannot stop now. We have seen the evidence. We have spoken with those who have been hidden. The truth is in our hands. They spent the rest of the day documenting everything they could observe without drawing further attention. Notes, sketches, timings of workers' movements, names of those hidden. Webb's ledger grew thick with information. Pritchard quietly took statements from the people they could trust. As night fell, the plantation looked peaceful. But both men knew the calm was an illusion. Riverside hid horrors in plain sight. Hartley would not surrender his secrets willingly, and the danger to anyone who sought to reveal them was real. Webb and Pritchard returned to Charleston with heavy hearts. They had confronted Hartley. They had planted the seeds of an investigation. But the shadow of Riverside hung over them. The hidden building, the vanished names, the broken people, all pointed to something more sinister than mere bookkeeping errors. And Webb understood something else. Confrontation was only the first step. The true horror of Riverside had yet to be revealed. If you want to see what happens next as Webb and Pritchard bring Riverside's darkest secrets to light, subscribe to the channel now. Share this story with friends who love suspense and historical horror. Comment below with your theories about what Hartley is hiding behind the plantation's walls. Part 7 is coming, where the investigation escalates, and the shadows over Riverside grow even darker. I can continue with Part 7, where Webb and Pritchard uncover the full scope of Riverside's horrors and face direct threats from Hartley. Do you want me to continue with Part 7 next? Part 7. The horrors revealed. Some nights carry a weight that makes sleep impossible. Some truths demand to be seen, even when fear grips every nerve. Marcus Webb and Reverend Pritchard had confronted Nathaniel Hartley, and they had seen the hidden building where people had been erased from Riverside Plantation. But what they were about to discover next would make the danger real, and the horror undeniable. It was a humid evening in May of 1858 when they returned to Riverside. The sun had dipped behind the river, leaving shadows that clung to the edges of the fields. The main house looked calm, even serene. But the silence was wrong. It carried the weight of something terrible. Pritchard and Webb moved quietly along the edge of the fields toward the hidden building. They had learned the routines of the overseers and the workers. Timing was everything. They could not afford to be seen. As they neared the building, a faint light flickered behind the shutters. Webb froze. Someone was inside. Not just the people they had seen before, but others. New arrivals. People who had disappeared from the records recently. Pritchard whispered, "We must be careful. We are close to the truth now, but Hartley knows we are watching." Webb nodded. They crouched behind a row of cotton stalks, peering through a crack in the shutter. Inside, the room was dimly lit by oil lamps. People moved slowly, silently, their faces pale, their bodies thin. Some were sitting quietly, others were tending to small fires or scrubbing floors. But what caught Webb's attention was the way they moved. There was a mechanical precision to it. Their eyes were vacant at times, haunted. They had been broken, shaped to obey without question, conditioned by isolation and fear. A man spoke quietly to a woman. "Please," he whispered, "do not tell. I cannot risk it." Pritchard took a deep breath. "This is worse than I imagined," he said. Webb wrote furiously in his notebook. The patterns of disappearance, the stable population numbers, the hidden building, the people kept in isolation, were no longer statistics. They were lives, stolen, broken, erased. They watched as Hartley entered the building, followed by two overseers. He moved calmly, inspecting the people, making notes on a small ledger. Webb's stomach churned. This was deliberate. Every disappearance, every name replaced in the records, had been orchestrated. Hartley spoke quietly to one of the overseers. Make sure the new arrivals are accounted for. Keep the numbers constant. No mistakes this time. The words were simple but horrifying. Keep the numbers constant. Replace the people. Maintain the illusion. Webb and Pritchard exchanged a glance. This was systematic. A machine designed to erase human lives while hiding behind the veneer of ordinary bookkeeping. Suddenly, a sound from outside drew their attention. A dog barked. Hartley looked up, his expression sharp. The overseers moved toward the doors. Webb and Pritchard ducked behind the cotton stalks, hearts pounding. They had been almost seen. Almost caught. Once the threat passed, they retreated to a safe distance. They needed a plan. They could not confront Hartley directly again. Not yet. But they had proof now. Proof that could not be ignored. Pritchard whispered, "We must bring this to Sheriff Dalton immediately. The ledger, the observations, the testimonies. Everything. He must see what we have seen." Webb nodded. "But we must be careful. If Hartley suspects we are gathering evidence, he could hide the people again or worse." They returned to Charleston under the cover of darkness. Webb's notebook was full. Names, dates, observations, sketches of the building, descriptions of the people inside. Pritchard had memorized the details and the stories. Together, they had everything needed to demand an investigation. The next day, they met with Sheriff Dalton. Webb presented the ledgers. Pritchard recounted the testimonies, describing the hidden building and the mechanical obedience of the people inside. Dalton listened, his face grave. "This is serious," he said. "I knew Riverside was unusual, but this is something else." "We have evidence now," Webb said. "Proof that the disappearances are deliberate, not clerical errors." Dalton leaned back, thinking. "I will assemble a team and visit Riverside myself. We will inspect the records, the people, and the hidden building. But you two must be careful. Hartley is powerful and connected. He will resist any scrutiny." "Yes, Reverend," Webb said. "But the families deserve answers. The people deserve justice." Dalton nodded. "Then we act carefully, but we act." That night, Webb and Pritchard could barely sleep. They had seen the horrors firsthand. They had documented what others had hidden for years. Riverside Plantation was no ordinary estate. It was a prison designed to erase human lives while maintaining the illusion of normalcy. And the danger was real. Hartley would not go quietly. He would fight to protect his secrets. The question was how far he would go, and how many more lives would be lost before justice was served. If you want to see how Sheriff Dalton's investigation unfolds and what Hartley does to protect his secrets, subscribe to the channel now. Share this story with friends who love suspense and historical horror. Comment below with your theories about what Hartley might be hiding next. Part 8 is coming, and the confrontation escalates. Secrets will be exposed, threats will rise, and the shadows over Riverside will grow darker than ever. I can continue with Part 8, where Dalton leads the first official investigation into Riverside Plantation and faces Hartley's resistance while uncovering deeper horrors. Do you want me to continue with Part 8 next? Part 8. The investigation begins. Some truths demand action. Some horrors cannot be ignored. Marcus Webb and Reverend Pritchard had seen the hidden building at Riverside Plantation, the people kept in isolation, the erased names from the records. Now the investigation had begun. Sheriff Dalton was determined to uncover the full extent of Nathaniel Hartley's secret, but the path ahead was dangerous, unpredictable, and full of shadows. It was a warm morning in June of 1858 when Dalton arrived at Riverside with Webb and Pritchard. He brought 2 deputies, careful men who knew how to observe without alerting Hartley. The main house appeared ordinary, the fields well kept, and the enslaved workers moving about as if nothing were wrong. It was a perfect facade. Dalton stepped out of his carriage and adjusted his hat. Webb and Pritchard followed closely behind. "We need to be thorough," he said quietly. Hartley is careful. If he suspects anything, he may try to hide evidence or intimidate the workers. Webb nodded. We have already documented much, he said. Names, dates, testimonies, sketches of the hidden building. Pritchard added. But the people themselves, those still inside, must be approached carefully. They are frightened. Hartley greeted them on the front porch, his expression polite but guarded. Sheriff Dalton, gentlemen, he said. To what do I owe this unexpected visit? Dalton spoke firmly. Mr. Hartley, we are here to review your records and ensure compliance with county laws. We may also need to inspect your property. Hartley smiled thinly. Of course. I have nothing to hide. My records are meticulous. You will see that there is no cause for concern. Webb and Pritchard exchanged a glance. They had seen the records, and they knew the truth. The challenge now was to gather undeniable evidence without tipping Hartley off. Dalton began with the tax records. Webb guided him through the ledgers, highlighting the stable population numbers over years and the missing names. Hartley watched silently, carefully controlling his expressions. Dalton asked questions, some innocuous, some pointed. Each answer Hartley gave was precise, almost rehearsed. He seemed calm, but Webb noticed subtle signs of tension. The man who had hidden lives for years was suddenly on the defensive. Next, Dalton and the team approached the cabins. Workers were reluctant at first. They whispered among themselves, afraid of retribution. Pritchard spoke quietly to each, offering reassurance. Your names will be documented, your safety protected, he said. One by one, the workers recounted the disappearances, naming the people who had vanished and describing their time in the hidden building. Dalton's eyes darkened with each story. The ledger may show numbers, he said quietly, but the truth is in the people themselves. Finally, Dalton insisted on seeing the hidden building. Hartley protested, claiming there was nothing unusual, but under Dalton's authority, the door was opened. Webb and Pritchard were there, hearts pounding. Inside, it was worse than they remembered. The rooms were small and dimly lit. People moved cautiously, fear etched into every expression. Some had been in isolation for months, others for years. They whispered names, stories, and pleas for help. Dalton took careful notes. The systematic concealment was undeniable. People were being held, replaced in the records, and treated as though they were invisible. Hartley's composure began to crack. This is private property, he said sharply. You have no right to intrude on my household. Dalton did not flinch. The law grants me authority to investigate irregularities in records and property, he said. Your attempts to hide people and manipulate records violate county law. Webb recorded every word. Pritchard comforted the frightened workers. The full scale of Hartley's operation was now documented beyond doubt. But the confrontation was not over. Hartley knew that exposure could destroy him. He would resist, intimidate, and attempt to manipulate the narrative. Dalton understood the danger. We will take this evidence to the county court, Dalton said. Charges will be considered. Hartley will have a chance to respond, but the truth is in front of us. Webb felt a surge of hope. Justice may finally reach the families whose loved ones had vanished. Pritchard's eyes were resolute. The people have been seen, their stories recorded, he said. Nothing more can erase their existence. As they left Riverside that evening, the sun setting over the Ashley River, the plantation appeared peaceful. But Dalton, Webb, and Pritchard knew the calm was an illusion. Hartley would not surrender easily. Threats, deception, and intimidation were likely to follow. The first step had been taken. The investigation had begun. The hidden building, the erased names, and the testimonies of the workers had all been documented. Now it was up to the law to act, and up to Webb and Pritchard to ensure nothing was hidden again. If you want to see how the county responds and how Hartley fights to protect his secrets, Subscribe to the channel now. Share this story with friends who love suspense and historical horror. Comment below with your thoughts on what Hartley might do next. Part 9 is coming, where the legal battle escalates, threats intensify, and the horrors of Riverside Plantation are laid bare for the world to see. I can continue with Part 9, where the court becomes involved, Hartley fights back, and the full scale of Riverside's atrocities are exposed. Do you want me to continue with Part 9 next? Part 9. The truth exposed. Some truths cannot stay hidden forever. Some horrors, no matter how carefully buried, will claw their way to the surface. The investigation into Riverside Plantation had begun, and the walls Nathaniel Hartley had built around his secrets were starting to crumble. But what awaited Marcus Webb, Reverend Pritchard, and Sheriff Dalton in the courtroom was more dangerous than any shadowed field or hidden building. It was a humid morning in July of 1858 when Webb, Pritchard, and Dalton arrived at the Charleston County Courthouse. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of river water and dust. The courthouse steps were crowded with people curious about the proceedings. Whispers carried tales of Riverside Plantation and the mysterious disappearances. Some came out of fear, others out of morbid fascination. Inside the courtroom, Hartley waited. His posture was perfect, his expression calm, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. For the first time, the respected planter faced a challenge he could not control. Webb and Pritchard had gathered the evidence, the testimonies, the ledgers, and the sketches of the hidden building. The truth was no longer a secret. The judge entered, a stern man with graying hair and an air of authority. Court was in session. Dalton stood first, presenting the situation. He outlined the irregularities in Hartley's records, the statistical impossibility of a stable population, and the vanished names over the past 8 years. Webb and Pritchard presented their documentation, carefully organized, leaving nothing open to doubt. Hartley's lawyer attempted to dismiss the evidence as conjecture and hearsay. The missing names were clerical errors. The hidden building was for storage, he claimed. The family's testimonies were unreliable, he argued, because the witnesses were enslaved and their words carried no legal weight. Dalton countered with precision. The records alone proved irregularities. Webb testified on the statistical impossibility of a constant population. Pritchard recounted the first-hand accounts of the workers still recovering from isolation in the hidden building. The judge listened intently, scribbling notes, his expression growing darker with each revelation. Then the witnesses were brought in. One by one, the survivors of Riverside Plantation told their stories. They spoke of months spent in darkness, of hunger, of the fear that gripped them when overseers watched their every movement. They described Hartley's meticulous record-keeping and how every disappearance was masked in paperwork. The courtroom fell silent as a young woman named Grace, who had been hidden for nearly 2 years, spoke. She described seeing her friends vanish and being forced to maintain the illusion that everything was normal. Her voice trembled, but her words were clear. Hartley sat perfectly still. The mask of composure was cracking. Each testimony was another brick removed from the wall he had built to hide his crimes. Webb presented charts, showing the statistical anomalies in the population counts. Pritchard explained the network of families desperate for answers. Dalton emphasized the law. People were property on paper, but they were human beings in reality. The concealment of their existence, the false records, and the hidden building violated both tax law and common decency. Hartley's defense tried to dismiss the evidence, claiming that the hidden building was for work storage and that the people had been transferred to other plantations. Webb and Pritchard had anticipated this. They presented the records showing no documented transfers, no bills of sale, and no notifications to the county. Every claim Hartley made crumbled under scrutiny. The judge paused, glancing over the ledgers, the testimonies, and the sketches of the hidden building. The truth was undeniable. Hartley had erased lives and hidden the reality of Riverside Plantation from the world. Finally, the judge spoke. "Nathaniel Hartley," he said, "the court has reviewed the evidence. The concealment of individuals, the falsification of records, and the systematic erasure of lives cannot be tolerated. You will face charges for the unlawful confinement and concealment of people under your control. You will also be held accountable for violations of county record-keeping laws." Hartley's lawyer protested, but the weight of the evidence was overwhelming. The courtroom had witnessed the horror of Riverside Plantation firsthand. The lives stolen, the names erased, and the families broken could not be ignored. As Hartley was escorted out under the supervision of deputies, Webb and Pritchard felt a mixture of relief and sorrow. Relief that justice was being pursued. Sorrow for the people who had suffered, and for the lives that could never be fully restored. The families of the disappeared were finally given answers. Though nothing could undo the pain, they could begin to heal knowing the truth. Webb and Pritchard stood together outside the courthouse, the sun high in the sky. "We did it," Pritchard said quietly. "We uncovered the truth." Webb nodded. "But the work is not over. Others may have suffered in places like Riverside. This is only one plantation, one story. We must remain vigilant. If you want to see the final part where the full consequences for Hartley are revealed and the survivors begin to reclaim their lives, subscribe to the channel now. Share this story with friends who love suspense and historical horror. Comment below with your thoughts on how justice was served and what might come next. Part 10 is coming, the final part, where Riverside's darkest secrets are laid bare, and the survivors take their first steps toward freedom and healing. I can continue with Part 10, the thrilling conclusion where the full story is resolved, Hartley faces consequences, and the survivors begin their journey forward. Do you want me to continue with Part 10? Next, Part 10, the final reckoning. Some stories demand an ending that cannot be ignored. Some horrors, once exposed, cannot be contained. Riverside Plantation had been a place of fear, secrecy, and vanished lives. Marcus Webb and Reverend Pritchard had documented the crimes. Sheriff Dalton had brought the law into the shadows. Now it was time for the final reckoning. The courtroom was packed that July morning. Families of the disappeared, journalists, and curious citizens had gathered. The whispers of Riverside's horrors had spread far beyond Charleston. There was tension in the air, a mixture of fear, anger, and anticipation. Everyone knew that Nathaniel Hartley, once untouchable, was about to face consequences for his actions. Hartley entered the courtroom, calm on the surface, but his hands betrayed him. Webb and Pritchard were seated together. They had worked for months to bring this day about, meticulously gathering ledgers, testimonies, and sketches of the hidden building. The evidence was overwhelming. The judge addressed the courtroom. "Today," he said, "we confront a case that challenges the very understanding of law and morality in our county. We will examine evidence of concealment, falsification, and the erasure of human lives from Riverside Plantation." Dalton stepped forward. He presented the facts methodically, using Webb's charts and Pritchard's accounts. The numbers were clear. Over a decade, more than 30 people had vanished from Riverside, replaced in the records by others while leaving no legal trace. The hidden building, the isolation, and the fear were documented by first-hand witnesses. Hartley's lawyer attempted to frame it as administrative errors, insisting that no crime had been committed. Webb and Pritchard countered with testimony from survivors, describing the hidden building, the routine of erasure, and the fear imposed upon the workers. One by one, the survivors spoke. Grace, who had been hidden for nearly 2 years, recounted the months in darkness, the hunger, and the terror. Samuel described seeing friends disappear and realizing that the numbers on the ledger were more important to Hartley than human life. Ruth, now safe, spoke of the constant fear and the hopelessness she had felt when the outside world seemed oblivious to their suffering. The courtroom was silent. Every eye was fixed on the evidence of systematic cruelty. Hartley's carefully constructed image as a respectable planter was falling apart. The law could no longer ignore the human cost hidden behind numbers and ledgers. The judge leaned forward. "Nathaniel Hartley," he said, "the evidence shows deliberate concealment and falsification of records, unlawful confinement, and the systematic erasure of human beings from the public record. You have violated both county law and the basic principles of humanity." Hartley attempted to respond, insisting that his intentions were lawful and that he had acted within his rights. The judge cut him off. "Intentions do not erase actions," he said. "The people of Riverside were harmed. Their families were denied knowledge of their fate. Your actions have consequences." The verdict was clear. Hartley was stripped of his authority over Riverside Plantation. He was fined heavily for record violations, ordered to release all remaining hidden individuals, and faced criminal charges for unlawful confinement. While no punishment could restore the years lost or fully heal the trauma, it was the first step toward justice for the survivors and their families. Outside the courthouse, Webb, Pritchard, and Dalton watched as the released individuals stepped into the sunlight. Some were hesitant, unsure of how to respond to freedom after years of concealment. Others embraced the family members who had waited for news. Tears flowing freely, Pritchard spoke quietly to Webb. "The work is not over," he said. "There are others out there, places like Riverside. But this is proof that even the darkest secrets can be exposed, and the truth can prevail." Webb nodded. "And we have seen that persistence and careful documentation can make a difference. Even in a system that often ignored the oppressed, evidence and courage can bring justice." For the families, this day marked closure. For the survivors, it was a step toward reclaiming their lives. For Webb and Pritchard, it was a testament to the power of truth, observation, and compassion. As the sun set over Charleston, the river reflecting the orange and pink sky, Riverside Plantation no longer held its secrets. The hidden building was emptied. The erased names were restored. The ledger could no longer hide the human cost. And the shadows that had haunted the plantation were replaced by a cautious hope for the future. If you want to learn more about the untold stories of history, the hidden horrors, and the courage it takes to uncover the truth, subscribe to the channel now. Share this story with friends who love suspense, historical mysteries, and real human stories. Comment below with your thoughts on Riverside Plantation and what justice means in a world full of secrets. The story of Riverside Plantation is over, but the lessons remain. Vigilance, courage, and the commitment to uncover the truth can shine light into even the darkest places.